Boom, and we are back. Next up on Blockdown, he's a financial technology entrepreneur, an investor, and early adopter of digital assets. And he is also the co-founder and CEO of MoonPay, which builds payments infrastructure for crypto. In addition, he is also founder and general partner at HODL, a venture capital fund and company builder. Put your virtual hands together for Ivan Soto-Wright. Welcome to Blockdown. The floor is yours.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me at Blockdown. I'm Ivan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MoonPay. We're on a mission to bring 1 billion people into cryptocurrency by 2030. And we do that by focusing on connecting the legacy financial infrastructure to this new crypto economy. This talk really just want to kind of cover some of the background and history around our payment systems and money, and kind of where we're going and ultimately the world that we'd like to get to. Next slide. So I thought I'd start with a quote, a passage. So I'll start by reading that. Money would become nothing but alphanumeric data in the form of arranged energy impulses. It would move around the world at the speed of light at minuscule cost by infinitely diverse paths throughout the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It went even beyond that. Inherent in all this might be the genesis of a new form of global currency. This quote was written in 1999 by a guy named Dee Hock. And Dee Hock was the co-founder and CEO of Visa. So he was the original founder of Visa. And I just feel it's really prescient. He kind of understood this is ultimately where we want to get to. You know, money can be represented in the form of files, and it shouldn't cost so much money to move money around. And I think that's precisely the point of where we want to get to with this new crypto economy. Next slide. So if we look at the history of payments and money, it's really interesting. You know, we started with a barter system back in 6000 BC, people trading different items, typically food or cattle. Then we moved to eventually a cowrie shell system. This was in 1200 BC, and that was really popular around India and China. You know, some problems you have with these shells because people realized that they could find more shells. Especially when you had explorers coming to some of these new islands. So it wasn't really a perfect form of money, but in 1000 BC, you had metallic coins that were representing these cowrie shells, and eventually just more metallic coins that kind of persisted across Asia. China was the innovator in 806 AD with paper money. And then if we go fast forward even further, in 1816, we had the Coinage Act, with gold backing British pounds. Eventually, that also followed with the US dollar in 1913 with the Federal Reserve. But we went off that standard in about 1933 to the fiat system that we have today. And then 1950s and 60s, you started to see a lot of innovation around credit cards coming into the market. In 1997, we had electronic money. I think that the biggest thing that why we're all here and why we're excited today is Bitcoin. 2008, Bitcoin.org was launched. The white paper was released. And in 2009, we had our first Bitcoin Genesis event. Really interesting when we think about this, the kind of history of payments, where we are today, and how we can improve on our money system. Next slide. So when you think about the most popular payment methods today, it's really interesting just to kind of look at kind of the rough fees associated with using these different payment methods. Credit and debit cards today on average 2.9% on Visa and MasterCard. Some of the different network schemes charge even more, but it's very expensive when you think about it in percentage terms, right? Especially when you're moving billions, trillions of dollars around, very, very expensive. And we've seen some innovation more recently with Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, what you see in parts of Asia with WePay. And ultimately, what's interesting is it's really just been a layer on top of the existing debit and credit card networks, right? So it's still quite expensive. It hasn't really solved, it's solved something in terms of convenience, but it hasn't necessarily made it more cost effective. And then going from there, we have wire transfers that have been around for a while. Extremely expensive when you think about international wire transfers, $35, $50 any particular transaction. And then bank transfers are also, it's been a bit cheaper if you leverage the ACH payment system, but it can be quite slow. And so still by no means do we have a perfect system today, but this is kind of where we are. Happy to put this in the context of kind of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, still expensive, but I'll move on to that later in the presentation. Next slide. So when you think about what's happening, right, the best analogy, I like to use analogies to try to understand what's going on. And really, if you looked at the telecoms industry, it was really expensive to place long distance phone calls. And the reality, the why it was so expensive was the legacy infrastructure. We had landlines all over the world, and placing phone calls from one country to another, really expensive. And then we had this advent of something called voice over IP. And I'd say the first major application to take advantage of this technology was Skype, which drastically reduced the cost of long distance communication. And today, right now, I'm giving this presentation on Zoom. We're leveraging this voice over IP, which is now more and more people opted into the standard. And I think what's interesting about that is it's not like our cell towers and landlines have necessarily disappeared, but over time we start to opt into this kind of more efficient system. And I think that's exactly what's happening in financial services. We had all this legacy infrastructure, these payment systems that in a lot of cases predated the internet. We will eventually hopefully move to a standardized interoperable protocol, money over IP, MOIP. And I consider money over IP to be the blockchain. And kind of where we are today is we're still trying to figure out how do we take these blockchains and how can these blockchains ultimately be scalable to really bring down those transaction costs, because really we're just moving data, we're just moving files around. Next slide. So, back to what I was mentioning before, where we are today, this legacy financial system that we built was not built for the internet. Trillions of dollars are moving around inefficiently. When we think about the debit and credit cards, we're talking about percentage-based fees. When you're doing international wire transfers, extremely expensive. Western Union can even charge percentage-based fees on top of kind of that minimum, $20, $30 fee on every transaction. And the reality is the reason why it's so expensive is we do not have this kind of interoperable standard of money over IP. We're not using a blockchain. Next slide. So when we think about the future, I really believe crypto has the potential to replace our existing payments infrastructure. But to get there, we're not going to get there unless we can bring everyone into this new crypto economy. And the only way that we can get there is we need that backwards compatibility to connect to every single payment method across every single geography. So we need to use debit and credit cards. We need to have connection to bank rails. But ultimately, the idea is you bring them into that crypto economy, and eventually our transaction costs, I think, will tend towards zero. If you think about Bitcoin and Ethereum today, everyone talks about this issue around scaling. Bitcoin, the network fees, make it very expensive for microtransactions. But we have promised, there's incredible technologists working on the Lightning Network to try to scale and reduce those costs for making transactions using Bitcoin. When we think about Ethereum, we're plagued by gas fees. We're working on a number of solutions in terms of there's numbers of layers twos that are essentially trying to work to scale the Ethereum blockchain, which will bring down those transaction costs. Or what I think will ultimately end up happening is we might also move to a new layer one blockchain that is more performant. And what's interesting is you can still wrap some of these assets like Bitcoin onto these new blockchains to make it more cost effective to move money globally. But ultimately, my general thesis is transaction costs will tend towards zero in this crypto economy. It's just we're at the very beginning of this iteration cycle. You got to think about it. It's kind of we're at the dial-up phase. It will take 5 to 10 years until I think these scaling solutions really start to see mainstream adoption. And so to get there, it becomes creating all that backwards compatibility, having the support for all the major payment methods, and really doing that in a way that is a magical user experience, right? If it's not a better user experience than using a debit and credit card today, I don't think we're going to see the mainstream adoption. So that's obviously something that we need to solve. It needs to be easy. It needs to pass the mom test, to use cryptocurrency. But I think ultimately we're going to get there. I think what's also super interesting to think about is we're starting to become more comfortable with QR codes. I think the pandemic has definitely, I think, pushed us in that direction. It already happened in Asia. People use QR codes to transact and purchase things at point of sale. But with the QR code, what's beautiful is anyone with an internet connection, as long as they can access a crypto wallet, if you have an internet connection, you can have a public and private key and set up a wallet and basically go from unbanked to bank in seconds. With that QR code, you can interact and you can pay. So as long as we can fix some of these scaling issues and really reduce those transaction costs towards zero, I really believe this is the system ultimately I think we're going to adopt. And part of the challenge is different countries have different approaches around how they want to approach cryptocurrencies and how they're going to regulate it. In some countries, they might take a stronger stance around KYC and knowing who is owning this cryptocurrency, who possesses it. So identity ultimately gets linked to payments, and that's a significant challenge if you want to bring everyone into the mainstream adoption. Because as long as you have an internet connection, in reality, you can go from unbanked to banked and have a cryptocurrency wallet. The idea is, how can we also give people an easy way to identify themselves? And so that's another challenge that we need to solve. But ultimately, I'm optimistic that we're going to get there. And this is what we're focused on every single day at MoonPay. Every single payment method, every single geography, best-in-class conversions, and really a magical user experience to connect kind of this legacy financial system kind of to this new crypto economy. And when we do that, there's going to be incredible use cases that we can talk about beyond just speculation. I think today, obviously, tons of interest into crypto because of Bitcoin price movements. I think that attracts more people to wanting to understand what crypto is. It's an unprecedented macro environment that we have, where this macroeconomic environment has created a backdrop where people are looking for potentially a new sound money, which is the form of Bitcoin. But I think beyond just the story of Bitcoin, when you read the original white paper, we're talking about peer-to-peer electronic payments, and I think that's really the promise of crypto. And we will get there. I'm super confident that over the next couple of years, we will move in the same way that we had voice over IP. Money over IP will be kind of the governing standard. We don't know what blockchain that's going to be, but that will be the governing standard for us to settle payments, reduce transaction costs, and ultimately, it's a better world for consumers and for merchants, right? We don't have percentage-based transaction, almost taxes on every single transaction that we make, and super excited to solve some of those challenges with MoonPay. Next slide. Yeah, so super excited to solve some of these challenges with MoonPay. We're growing really rapidly. We'd love, if you're interested in on what I presented today about the future of money, want to be involved and kind of building this infrastructure to bring cryptocurrency mainstream, please reach out to talent at MoonPay. We're really excited to grow this crypto economy and show the promise beyond just new forms of money, but also how do we bring down transaction costs? How do we make this a better place for everyone to be in? So thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.